to talk about that?
Welcome back, everyone. We'll now begin the final committee of the afternoon for the Bellingham City Council. That's Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole has 4 agenda items before us this afternoon. The first one has to do with our 2017-2018 biennial budget. It's an ordinance amending the entire 2017-2018 biennial budget, providing for the adoption of the mid-biennial adjustments to the biennial budget pursuant to the terms of State Law RCW 35345.130. Would you like to start?
Yep. Forrest Longman, Budget Manager. Just going to give a brief overview of the ordinance in front of you. We've had some work sessions and some presentations, and so nothing has changed since then. The proposed mid-biennial adjustment adds an additional $2.2 million of general fund expenditures and $15.5 of other fund expenditures for a total add of $17.8 and a total biennial budget of $589 million. It also adds 11.75 FTEs. 1 FTE is removed to correct that should have been removed in a previous iteration of the budget, and 17.05 FTE reclassified. We didn't receive any public comment since the public hearing, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. So we have indeed had numerous work sessions on this, and much of this material has been previously published, I guess with slightly different numbers during our work sessions. Council members. Gene.
I'll move approval.
Second.
A motion before us to recommend adopting the 2017-2018 mid-biennial budget adjustments. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous recommendation for tonight. Thank you, Mr. Longman. Our next item is a discussion of the Shoreline Master Program, which included limited amendments that originated back in the year 2013. So I guess there'll be some discussion by Mr. Sundin.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Sundin, I'm going to read the statement first. Washington State Department of Ecology has issued a conditional approval of what's known as a limited amendment to the city's Shoreline Master Program that originated back in 2013. Staff would like to reintroduce the topic in case we've forgotten all about it, and outline the procedural steps towards final approval. Please note that the limited amendment would not affect any of the area in the waterfront district that is anticipated to be included in the upcoming revisions of the sub-area plan, nor would this limited amendment prohibit future opportunities for park space and public access in the shoreline. So what would it do, Mr. Sundin?
Thanks, Michael. Steve Sundin, Senior Planner. In fact, I became a Senior Planner since we talked about this last. But I didn't forget about this. I didn't have a senior moment. So in all seriousness, I just want to run through 4 things. I'm just going to kind of talk about the timelines, talk about the affected area, what the amendment is exactly, and then kind of how to proceed from here. Briefly, it's correct, in 2013, the city finished a public process. We went to the Planning Commission, public hearing. They made a recommendation to City Council. City Council had a public hearing, a work session, and then they directed staff in 2013 to send the proposed amendments to Department of Ecology. We used up a couple more years having some back and forth with them on the proposed change, and then kind of sat there for a while. We got that letter in February 2016. The urgency sort of was put to the side or the back burner. The port had a tenant they were entertaining during that time, and so the need to finish that swiftly sort of fell back in terms of priority. So now we're here today because we do want to finish, because we do have things that are upcoming for the waterfront district sub-area plan, and there's talk of amendments and so on, so we want to make sure that we have all of our old business sort of cleaned up. So that brings us to today. What I want to show on, and I think this is in your packet on page 14.
Maybe page 71 or 72. That looks like page 71 in our packet.
Oh, yeah, see, I don't get the whole packet.
Okay.
I just get my little.
We get the big form.
I just get my little piece. So this is the exhibit, and what this exhibit tries to show here is that the area that we're talking about for this limited amendment, and I'll describe that later, the limited amendment is this area shown here in kind of the dotted line right along the log pond, and its relationship to the larger portion of the waterfront district sub-area where we expect or anticipate there to be changes or revisions that come forward. And I just wanted to show this because these two areas are separate, and we don't, the limited amendment at hand is not going to affect the other stuff in the area shown in the solid black line. The key is that all of the same uses will still be allowed. Actually, I'll just talk about the amendment now specifically, but I want to make that clear that there's no crossover or overlap, so we don't expect those things to affect one another. The next exhibit, which is Exhibit B, we'll just kind of dial down a little bit further here. And again, this shows the area to which the limited amendment applies. It's just within the shoreline jurisdiction, which is just the 200 feet as shown here, measured from ordinary high water mark. And so there are a couple things that aren't changing. One is the existing buffer width of 50 feet is not changing. The additional 25-foot setback for buildings is not changing. So the future expected outcome is that that area in blue and green gets a combination of habitat restoration and public access. The limited amendment doesn't prohibit any of the things that are existing today in the sub-area plan or tomorrow or the next day in terms of parks or trails. It doesn't touch any of that stuff. All the amendment does is it allows, within that area that's yellow, it allows uses that are allowed by the underlying zoning that do not have any relationship to the water, don't have any requirement to be located on the water for navigation and commerce and those kinds of things. So it simply opens up a use flexibility for the property owners to be able to do uses that are called non-water oriented uses. I think it's important to note that when the Department of Ecology went through their review, because they're the ones that are tasked with issuing the final approval, the city went through an exercise by which we demonstrated compliance with the criteria for making these kinds of changes. And the letter that was sent in February says that the proposed amendment is consistent with the criteria that it takes to amend these. And so where we are at this point as of today is, well, actually it's next week. I'll be coming back to you with more detail, but next week we're hopeful that we can receive direction from the council to send an acceptance letter of DOE's conditional letter of approval. We have to then say to DOE, we agree with the things that you wanted us to change, and we would like our program to be approved, and then we would bring forward an adopting ordinance next week. Are there any questions?
Council members? April?
Has there been anything that's changed between the time when we set this to the side at February 2016 till now that is different, that would somehow impact a decision today versus if we would have made it back in February?
No.
Okay.
The only thing that's changed is that now we have a user down there. Obviously, we have logs being debarked and shipped off. But as far as the underlying land use rules and all the policies and things, everything is the same.
Roxanne?
Could you give examples of what non-water uses might be?
Yes, I can. In fact, I will even, I brought the use table from the Waterfront District. This area is in the industrial mixed-use zone type for the Waterfront District. And so some of the uses that could be allowed would be in this particular zone only would be offices, art gallery, art school, commercial art studio, institution of higher education, manufacturing, assembly, wholesaling, warehousing of things that don't have any relationship to the water. So those are the, pardon me, those are the kinds of uses that would be now allowed under this amendment. In addition to all of the uses that are allowed currently, which include, parks, trails, eating and drinking establishments, other uses that have to be close to the water.
Council members, any further discussion? This is for information only, and you said we'll have to be approving this this letter before it's finalized, and you'll come back with next week?
Yeah, and just specifically what we'll be asking for is we need actual direction from the council to say to DOE, we agree with the changes that you'd like us to make, and then do a first and second reading of the ordinance as well, of the adopting ordinance. And once DOE gets that letter from us, in their minds, that amendment is approved.
Okay, April?
Does this need to be passed by the Port Commission as well, or just the city?
No, the port is fully aware of what we're doing here today.
Those already been through their commission and approved by them?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sundin, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll go
you.
on to our next item. The next item is a summary of Bellingham City Council activities for the year 2017. This is something that I brought forward. It's really informational. Most of these things I assume council members themselves already know, having lived through it, but this is also kind of a transparency effort with regard to the public. In there's a letter where I summarize some of the things we sort of done internally with regard to how we run the city council. There's also a document there of some of the research projects that our council policy analyst has been doing behind the scenes, and also a description of the range of activities by our legislative assistant, which is not just putting together the package, but all the many other activities that she's involved with. And then also one of the emphases this year was on communication, enhancing our communication efforts, especially social media and the website. And relating to that, you'll find the last page of the on page 79, you'll see an indication of the web traffic to some of our top issues sites. Showing use. And, it's hard to say whether or not these are high or low numbers. Frankly, I think considering the fact that, municipal government is sometimes opaque, these are actually pretty healthy visitation numbers. And then finally, you see in here published the public document that we make available, which is our annual report, which Council President puts out every year. Is there any more comments by council members? Pinky.
I noticed there was no mention of the jail stakeholder group.
Oh.
There was only the incarceration task force, but both Marie and Mark worked on that.
Right.
And we also had 2 city council representatives on that as well.
That's true. That should have been included. Any other comments? April?
Well, I'd like to thank Marie, and I'm assuming Mark probably worked on this as well, but I know this is I think it even something that we brought back. I don't remember doing this the first year that I was here, where we went back over. Did we do
We've done it for the last 4
Oh.
years, but one didn't go out in 2016.
That's the first
Okay,
year I was
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think this is great, and it's easy on the eye. It's easy to read, and I think it's palatable. So thank you for all of your work on that.
Okay, any further discussion on this report? Okay, now we'll go on to our final item of the afternoon, which is council discussion of committee structure. City Council, we set aside this time to discuss our committee structure next year in 2018, including any potential restructuring and setting a practice for regular review of council committee structures. So the City Council divides its work into committees, and the number of committees and the names of the committees and the range of topics, it's adjusted year by year. Many of the committees haven't changed in decades, but others come and go, and so this is a chance to discuss that. I know Councilman Barker, you wanted to say a few things?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to take time, 2 things. One is to just go over our committee structure now before we reorganize, to make sure that it is addressing the most important and the highest topics of the council currently. And then just to, if we're interested, establishing a process. I think with everything going on, if we know every other year we're going to come back to this, take 5 minutes, look at it, decide if we've got things put in the right spots, and then move on with our with our reorganization. So to start, we've added the Justice Committee. Typically, we don't, the chair or the president doesn't take on a committee, so that leaves us with 7 committees with 6 council members to head. So, I mean, we can always have a council member take 2. I was interested in discussing public safety, moving over. I had talked about this with Chief Cook, but I haven't had a chance to talk to it with Chief Dahl. Moving public safety to the Justice Committee, and then consider, in the time that I've been on council, although there have been some pertinent things that have come out of Lake Whatcom, many times it's a readout of what's been going on there. And so I wonder if, and this might need some help from Ted, there's quite a few things under natural resources. Some of them align more with parks, some of them align more with public works. And so I'm just interested in potentially moving public safety to the Justice Committee, and then Ted, potentially, what would the impacts be if we merged public works with Lake Whatcom natural resources?
Good afternoon, Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. From the staff perspective, I think merging Lake Whatcom with Public Works, I don't see an issue with that. We didn't used to have a Lake Whatcom committee and Natural Resources committee, and you're right, Natural Resources is certainly much broader than Lake Whatcom. So I think it's up to council, obviously. From a staff perspective, like I said, we don't have any issue with bringing Lake Whatcom related issues through the Public Works Committee. Or if you have a discussion about broadening the natural resources to consider park-related issues or planning issues or whatever there may be, I think it's entirely a reasonable discussion for council to have.
Part of public safety would be with justice, but the other part of public safety would be with bike lanes and stuff like that. You would bring that forward under Public Works because that is,
Yeah, I would. My default would to bring all Public Works things through the Public Works Committee, anything that came through our department, and certainly there's overlap in a lot of them, but if it was something that Public Works was bringing forward, a good example is the pedestrian awareness campaign that we're working on right now. That certainly is a good collaboration between the police department and Public Works. We've been doing that in Public Works, Public Safety. Yeah. If the two were to split, we could go either way, probably depending on what department is the lead.
What we did is combine those years and years ago. We had a safety committee and we had a Public Works committee. The safety committee never met, so we put it with Public Works. So there you go. But that's what happened. I mean, yeah. I'm just being honest about it.
Yeah, it seems to me that the bike and ped stuff would stay in Public Works. We had very few things come up. One of them was like a taser. Some new ordinance came out about a taser, and we had to change our ordinance about tasers. That kind of stuff, we could always work with committee to figure out which place it would specifically go.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be agenda items that could go in one committee or the other, and we just have to decide where to put it at the time. Kelly?
Well, I guess I'd say 2 things. Public safety part of Public Works Committee is fire, police, and Public Works. So it's pretty heavy on the safety side. So I think you need to make sure you understand what that would mean. Secondly, and of course, how you divide your committees up is definitely up to you. Having a Public Works Committee, just from my opinion, with looking at all the things that Public Works does, which is more than almost anybody else because you've got a scope about that big. I'm real interested in looking at a capital budget next year, and I'd like to be able to work with Terry or whoever's the chair on really looking at our capital investments as opposed to finance and personnel, looking at our operating expenses. So however you work that out, that would be another request I would have for the council, is to make sure you have the capacity to be able to work with me on that. And I think it would give us all a better understanding of our ongoing capital commitments and our large projects that are coming on down the road. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Pinky?
I like that idea. I also, Lake Wacom Natural Resources is now a quarterly meeting, so it doesn't feel like it actually needs a committee chair. On the other side, under the other assignments, I'd also like to include that in this discussion, because one of the things is that we disperse the amount of committees that we're on evenly, but the amount of workload that is on these is not the same. And I wrote down all the hours that I actually spend per month on some of these committees, and they are substantially different than some of the other committees. And what I'd like us to look at is the amount of commitment some of these take and tier them so that everyone takes a tier 1 and everyone takes a tier 2 or 2 of each or something like that, because some of these might meet for an hour once a month, and then, for example, downtown partnership, traditionally that takes me 4 hours plus a month because there's always all the extra volunteer things and all those other things. So I'd like us to look at structuring these in a tier format and then have more equal distribution on who's carrying what loads of those.
Well, I think it's a good idea. Could you take a first stab at trying to put them into a tier structure?
I would absolutely be willing to do that. If I may ask of the council, whatever, I wrote down all the hours and commitments that I am on my committee, and even though our packet might say, oh, the board meeting is only 2 hours a month, anybody who serves on that committee, like I'm saying downtown partnership, for example, knows that it also includes all these other things. So if each council member would be willing to send me what your actual commitment is on any committee that has your name, I would be willing to put that in a spreadsheet and compile it.
It'd be really useful during a reorg.
I can do that.
Terry?
Yeah, in regards to breaking up public works and public safety, if we were to do that, I would suggest, rather than putting public safety in the Justice Committee, to establish a separate public safety, because although police, there's elements that leak over into the Justice Committee. Fire does not fit within the Justice, and that does take up parts. And those two units, fire and public and police, do work well together. So if you want to break up public works and public safety, my suggestion would be that we create then 2 separate committees. One that is public safety, that includes police and fire, and then public works. And if you want to put Lake Whatcom into public works, that would work. But I wouldn't suggest doing it the other way, because it doesn't make sense to me of doing that over in the Justice Committee.
Roxanne?
Our minds must be reading each other, because that was a concern that I had too. Another thing that I wanted to add, in addition to what you said, is that right now, and it might not always be like this, but the Justice Committee is dealing with some very heavy issues and that take a lot of time. So I just wouldn't want there to be any energy lost for the department's needs and for the public safety side of it. So that's just a hesitation I have, which could be solved with separating it in that way.
April?
Yeah, and in efforts of knowing that potentially natural resources like Whatcom would go into public works, was just trying to figure out the load, but I think that would just be moving the public safety somewhere. I don't necessarily think it needs its own committee. I think it would end up being much like Lake Whatcom is, where it's just maybe not as, no?
I don't think so. I mean,
I don't know. I'm trying to remember how many different specific things came without bike and ped, like specifically separate from public works that is public safety. I was just trying in my mind in the last 2 years I've been on here.
well, and what it is it's any police or fire issue, especially if we're going to be dealing with the RFA
Okay.
transition, and also public safety is our #1 priority, and so having a little bit more robust discussion about our split between preventative and reactive policing and community policing, and kind of highlighting how our police department operates, and then what's going to happen with fire. So I do think it would definitely not be a quarterly kind of thing. I think there would be things that we need to discuss. And your working committees aren't always taking action or making ordinances and stuff. Sometimes it's a way for staff and myself to get a discussion with you about important issues that are in that area. It doesn't necessarily be discussing an ordinance or whatever. So I definitely think that. I don't know if David's.
Well, that's helpful, thank you.
I think that having a committee where we can bring items forward is valuable.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a turn, and then I'll recognize Terry again. Part of this is just practical. We try to divide up the workload, and so that no committee is too small and too big. And one of the other issues I'd like to bring up is that we have adopted using the morning slot for some of the larger committees with more workload, and we use that morning slot about half the time we don't. And whichever committee that we see will be a pretty heavy hitter, sometimes it's public works, sometimes it's planning has been the big heavy hitter. Justice may be the heavy hitter next year. Part of this discussion, I appreciate, April, you bring it forward, is dividing up the workload and figuring out which of those might be appropriate to move into the morning slot, as necessary. I recognize Terry, then we'll go to Kelly.
Yeah, just in terms of, back to the issue on the split about not being enough, just fire alone. We're looking at EMS, we're looking at community paramedics, we're looking at the fire budget and the issues that come forward, as well as with the police.
Emergency management.
There's been a lot of big issues, and there's going to be some bigger issues coming, so that could stand. Yeah.
Well, then we could just eliminate the Lake Whatcom Natural Resources, put it in Public Works, and take Public Safety and stand alone then. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm sorry, Gene, can you say that again?
Take Natural Resource, put it in Public Works, and have the Public Safety Committee take that place as a committee.
Yeah.
Do we still have
Stand
seven?
alone.
Do we still have 7 committees then?
That's my
We
question.
would be. We
Yeah.
wouldn't be solving anything
We
there.
need to figure out how to stay at 6.
Unless somebody's...
We don't have.
We
to-
could
a
have
suggestion.
7 committees if
Public
2 of
Works
them were
might wanna
light
take
enough.
on
It
public
goes to your
safety.
point, Pinky. Not all these committees are, and there will be not just the chair, but also the members serving on them. Let's face it, all of us are going to be on several committees and doing a fair amount of work. We're just trying to divide it up. Kelly?
Well, I can make a suggestion so you'll only have 6, and then I'm going to bring up my favorite topic about scheduling. So,
Okay.
First is, we have a planning and community development department. It would be very helpful, since those things cross over quite a bit, if you wanted to have just one committee, to have community and economic development and planning in one committee, because that consolidates all the activities that are going on in the planning department. So that would give you 6 committees. The second question or issue that I have is, when we only have 1 council day, 2 council days a month, and I realize that you guys are all busy and you don't need anything else to fill up your time. If we could think of a way where we could do committee work 1 week, even if it's like just in the afternoon, and then a council meeting the next week, so that our staff would have time over the course of a week rather than a course of a couple hours to take your comments and considerations and amendments and drafting into consideration for you. It would potentially spread out the work a little. You wouldn't have to work any more hours. I realize for someone like Pinky and Roxanne, that's, it's difficult. Okay, it's my pet thing, and so I just thought it would annoy everyone if I didn't bring it up, so I thought I would. Yeah, I'm being consistent.
Pinky?
Mayor, I appreciate the suggestion, but I think one of the things that is a struggle in our political system today is that the fact that we don't have opportunity for people who have working lives and families and those things to participate in this format. And I think the more difficult that we make it, the less that will happen. And for myself, who has a full-time job, and I have very clear limitations on the amount of availability that I have.
Okay, so I think I'm seeing broad recognition that it'd be nice to be able to adjust these, but I'm not right now seeing consensus on what to do. Terry?
Yes. Are you looking at someone needs to make a motion regarding those changes?
Well, it'd be nice going into a reorg meeting to know what they are. Maybe maybe we're not ready for that. Maybe we are.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you're looking for.
Well, I think unless anybody's opposed to community development, and Rick's here, I'm imagining he might want to weigh in, but planning and community development, then we have combining that with planning. Yeah,
Yep.
and then taking public safety, it sounds like it's going to be a pretty robust topic. Somebody's going to have quite a bit of work, and I know you all serve on some other committees too that are related, so
Yes.
having that alone, and then bringing natural resources over to Public Works. And I would just say to go ahead, and it's going to be a long title, but I would suggest keeping Public Works, Natural Resources, Lake Whatcom, because there's going to be people that want to make sure that we're not burying Lake Whatcom somewhere, that it's staying up front and they're seeing it in the title. So that would be my suggestion, leaving Justice Committee as it is. Public Safety stays on its own. Planning, Community Development, Economic Development go together. And Lake Whatcom, Natural Resources moves to Public Works.
Is that 5 committees?
6.
That's 6. Okay.
That's my motion.
Is that a motion?
Yep.
Okay. Unfortunately, I cannot restate that motion.
I'll state it.
Please do.
Way to go, Michael.
So, planning will join with community development, community and economic development. Public safety will become its own committee. Lake Whatcom and natural resources will join with Public Works. Got it, Marie?
Okay. Any further discussion of this? And so these would be the new 6 committees that we would elect chairs for, if approved, and the reorg meeting. Kelly, comments?
So on the, just to make sure, on the Justice Committee is where we're talking a lot about the criminal justice system and that kind of thing, which then would potentially be separate from the Public Safety Committee.
They'd be.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm thinking about it the
There
right
might
way.
be some overlap.
No, there might be some overlap, but in general, if we're talking about the public or the jail or the whatever, we would do it in where?
Justice.
Yeah, okay. Just so long as there's some kind of conceptual agreement. I realize things can go
Yeah.
back and forth to committees, so that
Yeah, and
is
to
not a
clarify,
problem.
the council presidents is usually consulted on these cases, and I've turned to committee chairs and say, do you want this in your committee or the other committee? I mean, there will be in-between cases, no matter where we draw the line.
Yeah.
But we have a motion before us to do a reorganizing, which would move community economic development to join with planning, and to move the natural resources and Lake Whatcom component to join with public works, because again, those are at a department level, those are actually often combined. Public Safety Committee would remain a freestanding committee, and the Justice Committee would remain a freestanding committee. Is there any further discussion of this?
Second?
I think we already had that
Oh, did
motion.
we?
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
That passes. Terry.
Under other assignments for the reorg meeting, we need to add the Regional Fire District Committee, because that's real active, and we've been putting in, Michael and I and the mayor have been meeting on that every other week for 2 to 3 hours in the every afternoon, so there's been a lot of time going, and there's going to still be, so that will have to be added on as for the committee groups.
Okay. We'll make sure that's included. And Dan, the groups that you've been involved in, are they going to be active next year?
To
And
vote on.
you'll want those assignments recognized if you continue?
Well, it looks like
Your button.
the policy, the Lake Whatcom policy, sorry. It's twice today. What's in the air? The Lake Whatcom Policy Working Group, that's a smaller commitment than it was in terms of time and frequency, but the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force continues to, it just seems like it keeps evolving and getting bigger. So I don't know.
yeah.
It'll continue.
I think they kind of offset each other to some degree.
I think we will include that. Sorry, I
Yeah,
think we'll include that
'cause
on the list
I see
of.
that as going on,
Of ex
or
officio
some
assignments.
rendition of it
Yeah.
going on for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay. And we haven't quite touched with the issue I brought up, which is which of these we could move to the mornings, but we don't need to decide that today. We can do that in January. Kelly?
There's some of these other assignments where there's voting that goes on, like WTA,
Library.
COG. I think in that case, it's really important to maintain a liaison there, somebody there. If you choose to not do, to look at not assigning someone to some of these as an active participant, maybe you could still be an ex officio member. You could have somebody that they would contact, so that those groups that might not see you at their monthly meetings or their quarterly meetings or whatever meetings they are would know if I have a problem or if I have a concern or if I have a request, I can contact April or Dan or whoever is involved in that. I think, especially with the relationship we're developing with the school district, I think that's important for them to have not necessarily someone that's there at all their board meetings and stuff, but that there's liaisons to some of these. And I don't know what some of these are when I look at them, so some of them may not be necessary. I don't know.
Does the airport, do you still go to that one, or is that one even?
Airport Advisory Committee?
It's still going. I, at the direction of the council last time, said I'd continue it, but I'd just be the liaison, so I've only attended one of their meetings. I look
Because
at
I
all
can
of
tell
their
you,
agendas to see. if
I
there's
do
something.
vote on the Port and Mena Advisory Committee, and Sister Cities I don't vote, but I do. We don't take votes in the Lake Whatcom Policy Group either, or have we? Not yet. No. Okay.
Pinky?
It's a good question.
Maybe we could take this spreadsheet to another level. If it has a voting, make a spreadsheet to include if you have a voting or also if you feel there is value or not in us participating. And if we could have that all in the spreadsheet and I could bring that to the conversation, and then we could see things that are obvious where people say, yeah, absolutely, no question, or negotiate any of those that we think are not longer necessary. So we'll put, maybe if you can include those in your comments, and I'll work with Marie to make sure we have everything spelt out, that the information that we need in order to create a spreadsheet.
Okay. And I do think we've adjusted this, and some things come and go each year. April.
I would make another
and Dan.
motion that we have this on a plan that we revisit every other year, unless somebody feels like we need to,
I
just so
actually
it
think
happens.
we revisit it every year.
You want to do it every year? Okay,
Yeah.
every year it gets revisited and second to last meeting.
Informal.
Hello.
Oh, ha. So my motion is that this is a standing assignment that we do second to last meeting of every year of just relooking at our organization.
Second.
Okay, so the motion basically to send an internal council policy to do committee assignment and committee structure review at the end of each year in preparation for the anticipated reorg meeting.
Yeah, and it definitely needs to be that second to last, because if there was anything left here, we would need to
Not
address it
last.
at the next. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be adopting a new standing procedure to hold that review at the first meeting in December in preparation for the reorg at the first meeting in January. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That passes unanimously. Dan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify Councilmember Vargas's criteria that you're looking for. So you wanted hours, meeting hours, and commitments beyond meetings, voting, and what about upcoming, pending things like regional fire authorities can be huge coming up. Do you want like a notes category or something where we should be just have a heads up on, or providing you a heads up on?
I think that sounds great. And again, I can work with Marie and we can put something out too so it has much clearer. And if you're like, oh, it's missing this, then we will add that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think my last one would be, some of these were, like, specifically the port has said a city council member, like that's that weird one with the airport advisory. because you're appointed to, and then we're saying who that person's going to be. So I think that that would probably be a column as well. And then after my 2 years on Opportunity Council, it became quite clear that we are not appointing somebody to be a board member. We are appointing a liaison. If that person chooses to become a board member, that's great. They can have voting power and then they can stay on. So I chose to be a voting board member. So I'm happy, we can talk about that, but I'm happy, whoever that person is should probably stay as the liaison. But those are two very separate things. And there was confusion when I was appointed, and I think they felt like there's been some confusion in the past that council's sending somebody over to be a voting board member, and that is not the case. So.
Kelly.
The other one that isn't on the list, if we're adding, of course, because we don't have enough, would be the jail. If there's some kind of jail committee, and it might just be might just be a short-term assignment.
I hope it won't be just a short-term assignment. I hope there'll be some collaboration on issues that come up in our criminal justice system, but at least for now, I just add that.
Yeah, there's also the Homeless Strategies Work Group that two of us have been assigned to with the county. Again, what level of commitment is that? That may be a shorter term, moderate workload one. This jail stakeholder group, again, one of our outside assignments. It could be moderate, could be more than moderate.
So that's, when you look at things like the housing one that we're going to do with the county, that's part of us potentially having some influence on what comes out of that and how we spend our money, et cetera. So I think we should add that one too. And then some of the other ones that are like the Open Space Committee or potentially the Bellingham School District, even though I think we should have a strong liaison position, those would be ones where they're not asking for us to be voting or, doing anything official. So then it's up to the liaison how involved they would like to be, but at least they know who it was. So there's the jail one and the housing.
Yeah, the Homeless Strategies Work Group. I'd like to wrap this discussion up, but Terry, you had your hand up?
I was just going to say, Mayor brought up open space. That one hardly ever meets, but it is automatically defers to the Parks and, I think it's Parks and Rec Committee. So
Planning.
That's why it's a great one to
Planning
assign
Committee.
to.
So,
But it could be a liaison, Terry, instead of a committed meeting.
there is no committed meeting to it.
Right.
It's right. Yeah, it's just automatic.
We'll always appoint someone to it, but to Pinky's
Those are
point,
always
it's a
those.
low workload assignment.
Right.
April?
Really quick, the Greenways, they were confused as to why somebody is appointed to Parks, but not to Greenways, so that would be a discussion for us to have if somebody wants to add another one. But then I think yet another column would be, do you feel like one of these lines up with one of the committees? Because it's really helpful to have, Dan, you've been working on a ton of this stuff, and fortunately you've been willing to come to the Justice Committee, but we would lose something. Not that it means you have to stay with it, but certainly something to consider when we're putting people in is this adjoining with the committee, and are you involved with that committee?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the discussion. We'll now wrap up. That's the last of our agenda items for Committee of the Whole. We do have approval of City Council meeting minutes from November 13th.
Move approval.
Second.
Any changes needed to those meeting minutes? Okay. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are adopted. We now go to old and new business. First, I'd like to announce that our agenda management software system, the SIRE system, is indeed being replaced. We'll have a new system in place starting next year. That should be shorter transition times between the committees, but there will also IT staff will be present and on hand during the break-in period at the beginning of next year to make sure things go smoothly. Marie, is there anything else we want to announce about that?
No more sire jokes.
Okay, and
It'll be
this hopefully
something
will go better for Marie as well as for all of our staff members who work behind the scenes getting this together. Pinky, you had an item? Okay, Dan.
So last week I went to Missoula, Montana to meet with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, their council members, their parking commission, historic district representation, and the equivalent of their downtown Bellingham partnership. It's the downtown Missoula folks. This is very germane to what we just talked about. I was going to bring this up tonight, but I think now is more appropriate. So they have developed since 1980 a tax increment financing tool for redevelopment for their downtown core. And they've been able to very successfully use those dollars to leverage against other dollars to do redevelopment. And so what I was hoping to do would be to, in the Finance Committee next year, early next year, to have some discussions along the lines of how we did in planning, where we had work sessions talking about, you know, any similar tools that would be at our disposal that we could use for redevelopment strategies. Also, there's the REIT 1 and REIT 2, the real estate excise tax 1 and 2, that could be applied towards homeless strategies. There's also Senate Bill 2263, which is now RCW, that can be exercised at the local municipal level, not just the county level. So we have these options, and I would just like to be able to talk with our finance director and other individuals to see, you know, what that would look like. So I don't know if I need to make a motion here or if that's brought up in the committee itself or how that would work. But
Normally, if you want to refer to committee, you would make a motion. But Kelly, you have something to say?
Well, first of all, in Washington State, we don't have tax increment financing. And after 8 years, I was able to get tax increment financing passed, but we had to call it local infrastructure funding tool. So TIF and LIFT are the same thing. We also got the $25 million that we've been matching every year, $1 to $1 million, for the waterfront development. And the one thing we had to do for the state is you had to define the area. And you could go out for another LIFT opportunity, maybe, but the state has been very reluctant to add a lot of those now because the money comes from the state to match the investment that the locals are doing. On downtown, we've been trying to use a little bit more the Main Street program and maximize matching money with that. And if we were going to look at something for downtown, I'd be interested in discussing all of our options, but I'd like to throw a local Main Street program into the mix rather than trying to involve the state in expanding our LIFT, just because, as far as I know, they haven't been expanding that recently. So we already have the tool in place. We could use it. We could make a proposal. And it would all depend at the state level whether they had money to match. On the local side, I mean, that's the same thing with Main Street. Main Street is matched with state money.
B&O taxes, yeah.
Yeah, and we actually were really good at being up at midnight, I think, on January 1st to push the button. So we got some money this time. So congratulations to Downtown Bellingham Partnership. But we had talked about the fact that that money that used to be abundant is not now. But it might be something we'd like to look at for our downtown, in addition to these other things that you're talking about. And the REIT money, when I think of a capital budget, I think of REIT and property tax. When I think of an operating budget, I think of B&O, sales, and potentially REIT. So I think of things kind of to fund different things. It was just the tradition that we had in the state level because the capital budget dollars needed to be more stable so that we could make the commitment about what we were going to do.
So Kelly, I'm going to intervene because it sounds like there is a topic or a discussion that could be had here.
I'm glad
what
Dan
we'd
brought
be
it
looking
up.
for is to see if the council agrees that there might be a referral of some subject to committee. I don't know if you want to frame your motion and see if there's support.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we that these financing tools and other taxing authorities and this is going to be a very terrible motion, that these other taxing authorities and future taxing obligations like TBD and RFA and such be discussed in a work session format in the Finance Committee.
I would love that.
Okay, and the goal would be economic development, or
not specifically to economic development. I think that it's broader than that. I guess what I would like to look at the end of these work sessions, these theoretical work sessions, is a work product that outlines here are the available financing tools. Here's what we can do with them. Here's what we've traditionally done with them. Here are future opportunities, just to provide for the Finance Committee some guidance to broader council and to the executive.
Okay, I think I understand better, and that's why it would go to the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of these things that Dan just brought up are coming up for renewal or different things. I think it's really important that we have this discussion, and I would love it if it was at a committee, an official committee level.
Was there a second for Dan's motion? There was? Okay, is there any further discussion? This is a motion to refer to committee, the Finance Committee, these various possible tools, and I don't know, the larger picture, revenue sources. I don't know how to rephrase this motion very well, but does the administration believe they understand?
I think if you formed it that we would take our sustainability discussion, which is using all of those different funding sources, if we'd have a detailed sustainability discussion in the Finance Committee, I think that would probably be the simplest motion to make.
Of current revenue sources and potential.
What the mayor just said.
What the mayor just said. So you're referring to the financial sustainability discussion that began about 2 years ago.
And we've been working on it. We meet and we talk about it, but there's things that need to be fleshed out, and there is a bigger picture rather than just the options that are, just the options that we're talking about specifically.
Do you think you can fairly summarize that? Okay. Any further discussion on this motion to refer to committee? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll refer it to committee sometime early next year. Pinky.
Thanks, Mr. President. A couple of weeks ago, I discussed our participation in the Georgetown University Energy Prize, and I was a little concerned because we hadn't heard back in a very long time. And today, I have good news. So we did hear back, and Bellingham is actually selected as one of the top 10 finalists for our participation in the Georgetown University Energy Prize for the Bellingham Energy Prize. So we have made the top 10 of the 50 cities that were competing in the prize. In the state of Washington, also the other cities that were chosen are Bellevue and Walla Walla. So we are one of the 3 locations in the state of no Anacortes did not make it. So sounds like a basket is due there from Mayor Geary. So we'll have that discussion with her, sadly, but Anacortes did put in a great effort. But Bellingham did an outstanding job, and I'm very proud of everyone who worked on this. And I particularly want to put out accolades to Mark Gardner, our research analyst, who really did a phenomenal job of carrying a lot of the load and logistics and getting everyone together and making sure everybody was on point. But this is a huge success for our city. This is national recognition that we made the top 10. And I want to thank everyone and acknowledge them for their efforts. And hopefully when I come back next time, I'll say, we won! But I'm optimistic. So just wanted to report out on that.
Thank you. Anything else under old and new? Terry?
I just wanted to announce, this is coming up for this coming year, the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. We are going to be moving, it's on January 15th, the normal time at noon, but we're going to be doing it at the Mount Baker Theater there instead of in City Hall, given all the different issues, national issues, other issues, and the people that have been wanting to attend, and it's becoming harder to do so in the City Hall. We're going to be having it at the Mount Baker Theater this year.
Okay, anything else under old and new? April?
The zip line's open at Squalicum Creek Park. I know several adults that tried to break it, and it did not break. Not that they purposely did, but you can't keep the adults off of the thing.
I can't use it? Wow.
So it's open. It's been a really long time, and being a substitute in the public schools, it is the one thing that I am asked every single time I walk into a school. So we did it.
Okay, anything else under old and new business? Okay, so we're now going to go ahead and take a recess and then reconvene in executive session. Executive session is closed to the public. There will be a report at the regular meeting tonight about what happened. There are now 3 executive session items. One was added after the packet. The first 2 are potential property acquisition matters, and the third one is collective bargaining, review of the proposal for the Watcom Dispatchers Guild Agreement. We are now in recess. And those items are scheduled to take approximately 20 minutes. I will be back here at about 5 minutes after 4 o'clock.